Hey guys, Dark Humility here with the Season 10 PD2 starter lineup. All of what I consider to be the top starting builds in the game for Season 10, including some new ones that I either didn't have on the list or I didn't consider to be near the top in previous seasons. Of course, this will all be based on the top strategies in terms of finding loot and gathering loot in LOD so that you can make your character viable for mapping. I consider a character to be viable for mapping once it hits about 35 to 40 skills or equivalent in physical weapon damage in general, and that's typically when like tier 1s become like viable. In other words, they're stronger than just doing LOD content fast, Lord of Destruction content, the base game. But in general, when we look at, of course, starting builds, what we really want to consider are a couple things first before we start getting into the nitty gritty. I'm going to start going over, of course, build specific strategies and whatnot that are going to be helpful for every build. But first, what I'm going to do is just talk about something called the early game trifecta of power, which is something that determines how strong a build is in the early game in general. And this is just something to keep in mind. These types of builds also tend to be easy to stack magic find on as well, which is a much more important stat outside of the map than inside the map. But even inside the map, of course, can be very key for generating tons of high quality items and getting those GG slams and getting rich as fast as you can. Of course, in LOD content, there are many ways to get rich. You can farm Worldstone shards and corrupted zones. You got bosses. You got key farming. You got map farming from the primeval souls from some of the bosses. You got chaos. You got Travancore. You got cows. You got arcane sanctuary. You got pit. You got just a lot of different areas. But in general, these types of things do make LOD content easier, and we'll talk about them briefly. So, of course, you even have the new Act 5 portal areas, which he buffed to Oblivion as well. So that is something I should mention, that those Act 5 portals, those red portals, are stacked with elites now. So if you become somewhat strong enough to farm those, you can probably find a lot of gear very fast. So those are definitely very viable areas now in Season 10 via recent patch changes. Anyway, so what we have here is high mobility, big AoE, and magic or physical type damage, or a combination thereof of these things. Any build that possesses these things tend to be stronger in LOD content. Why magic or physical type damage? There's a lot of immunities in early hell when you're trying to farm and get going for those mapping potentials. Or just getting your build strong enough to farm a boss, or whatever it is you're trying to do in PD2. And so magic or physical type damage in general tends to have a little bit of an edge. High mobility. So here we're thinking like, types of teleports in the early game matter quite a bit. You have the Sorceress with the strongest teleport, of course. And then, you have things like Blood Warp, you have Gust, and then you have Joust, and then you have Dragon Flight, and all the way down until you get to Leap, and then you just get to movement speed with the Zon. And so that is definitely going to be very key as well to making a build very powerful in early game and very fast at farming stuff in the early game. High area of effect damage. I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. If you have high AoE, just no matter the density of the area in the LOD content, it's going to kill a lot very quickly. And since in PD2 specifically, this isn't just the LOD content trifecta of power, it's more specific to PD2, because in Players 1 you get Players 5 drops. So that means that killing more monsters just in general will get you more drops, hence farming up faster. So those are really the keys to the early game power. It's the key to the gates of beautiful power and strength in the early game. Now, these builds, of course, that I line up for you guys for each of these 7 classes in my starter lineup, which is on my Season 10 tier list and infographic. You can access it, of course. I'll make sure to link this as well. And, of course, you can let me know what you think about these builds, or if you have any other builds that you like to start with in the comments below, and maybe I'll add them later, or, think about adding them next season if you have a convincing argument for how they can be strong. As you can see though, there are so many builds even in each class that have a lot of strong potential, and they don't need either much gear or any gear at all to get going, and they are very solid for farming your early game, your first couple days, your first week, your first 2 weeks if you're a bit slower of a player, or even first month if you just want to take it real slow, just take it nice, whatever it is. You can do that if you want to go hard on the mod, whatever. But in general, these are the builds that are going to be the best at it. They're going to be, I try to make builds that are easy. These are builds that are easy to do. These are builds that can do the content that's going to get you the most return for your investment of time. So, like I said, things like Hell Travancore, Chaos, Cows, bosses, Mephisto, and Dariel, obviously Diablo, part of Chaos, and then of course, there's red portal areas, there's the pit, which is pretty solid, has really low HP enemies, can always clear that pretty easily. You've got like Stony Tomb as well, which is pretty solid. But there's a lot of these areas, obviously Arcane Sanctuary, which is like a top area. It's just super, super high volume of like really good, valuable things you can get in there. And so like just based on the ghost loot tables, but we'll talk about all that stuff though in this video. So we did make one of these videos in season 8. This will be an updated one, so hold on to your hats. Do keep in mind the exact orderings of the builds is pretty subjective though for this starter video and just for the starters overall. There's not a lot of like hard science here. It's pretty qualitative. The quantitative stuff is way heavier on the mapping side of the tier list here. This one is definitely like, I could make an argument for why maybe Combustion Fireball could be even closer to number 1. They're all really close approaches. They're just good approaches, and hopefully you guys can understand why they're good approaches. And I try to have every class represented for the most part, for most of the good approaches except for Barb, which might struggle a bit just in general for starting, but for the most part every class has something. And of course Assassin as well. But yeah, anyway, so what we're going to do, of course, is we're going to get into the Sorceress. So the Sorceress is one of the best starting classes, period. She has fast teleport, she has big AoE on her abilities, and she does a ton of damage without much gear. This, of course, will make her very strong, and obviously, if you just max out Energy Shield and you dump all your points into energy, or a lot of them into energy, you'll also survive very well. Particularly on softcore. If you're on hardcore, you might want to watch that approach because high elemental damage might just end you with no problem. So, let's start with the first build, though. I actually moved this one up to the top this season. I thought it would be good last season, but I was right, and I think it still is like one of the best starters, period, if not the best starter overall. This is an insane starter. I'll explain why. So Leaf rune word is Turral. It can be made in a 2-socketed staff. That staff can have Inferno on it, 3 to Inferno. Of course, the rune word itself also grants an additional 3 to Inferno and also 3 to Fire skills. There is an item that you can get and literally shop from normal Act 1 Charcy, or sorry, Akara, not Charcy. Akara that can grant you 9 skills. 9 skills right off the bat, and Inferno is not a weak skill. And it can even break small fire immunities, such as even the Nightmare fire immunities in Chaos, Nightmare Chaos, right from the get-go even. And you don't have any problems passing through it doing this because it's just really that good. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention, I should probably mention before I get more into detail on this. If you guys want to know how any build becomes hell viable, it doesn't even matter. So before I start talking about hell farming, your go-to on PD2 with the Players 1 5-player loot is 100% always the Nightmare Cow level. Always. Every build. If you don't know this, I've hammered it out in all my, like every single one of my videos. Like the Rags to Riches guides on D2R. But this is even better than D2R because it's Players 5 loot. So if you want to know how to maximize that charm inventory, use the charm inventory. Cows are amazing for charms. You know how to use the density, clear Nightmare Cows, fill up your charm inventory. You'll have enough res and life typically to enter hell, almost on any build, even on hardcore. Even on hardcore. You just gotta farm for a bit. You might have to farm a bit longer in hardcore, make sure your life and res is even higher, but you will fix practically any build issue when it comes to entering hell just by farming Nightmare Cows. Doesn't matter what the build is. I guarantee you. I love to see someone prove me wrong on that. It's 100%. Yeah, abuse the crap out of it. Exactly, chat. Absolutely. Um, um, no, I mean, you could do Nightmare Mephisto, like, if you're on a Sork or something, sure, but I'm telling you guys, that charm inventory is so busted, and if you just abuse it with the fact that there's players 5 loot and players 1, and cows exist. Nightmare Cows is super strong even for LOD. It's still the go-to approach, I would say, even for entering hell on that. It's a little tougher, but on this mod, it is insane. It is insane. And if you're not doing it to get your builds hell proof and hell ready, you're not doing it right. That's all I want to say. No, Nightmare Arcane. Heck no. I was talking about Nightmare. So to make the build like hell viable, to make it like safer in hell, this is what you do. And cows will drop items too, obviously. So like they'll drop all kinds of good items. You could even get a Nightmare puzzle box. You could get a puzzle box as early as Nightmare Cows too. So it's like, it's really broken. It's really broken, and make sure to, whether you're playing hardcore or softcore, to abuse the crap out of that strat. Absolutely. All right, let's go back to builds. So Inferno Firewall has the 9 skill leap. Firewall is also amazing for bossing. And obviously the Firewall can be active while you're using Inferno, which means the negative res will stack on top of the Firewall. And Firewall does a ton of damage against bosses. It is insane. And so if you want to clear the Andariel or a Mephisto really fast, there's no faster way to do it really than, you literally just put on a lore helmet. You could use stealth, but you could just get a plus skill armor of any kind early game. And then you use the leaf staff, and you have everything else, and you might even be up to like 32 skills if you got like some fire skill ammy or something. And you're already crushing Hell Mephisto. No problem, pretty much right out the gate. Super easy, super simple, super powerful. I'm surprised they didn't nerf the leaf staff. I think they talked about the fact they probably should, but I guess they didn't end up doing it. Maybe because it still wasn't the most common starter. I don't know. I thought that start was insanely smooth when I did it last season, though. It was insane. Like, I've had lots of starts, but that one was just super, super easy. Super easy. Yeah, Inferno quest farming Duriel. Yeah, that's the other thing is so let's say that you don't talk to Tyrael and you just keep killing Duriel over and over. And he'll get his quest loot from that, and you can farm it with Inferno as well. Like, it's just super insane stuff, man. Like, you can get like insane loot from quest farming Duriel, Mephisto. It's really good. And of course, obviously, the gear is pretty simple. Now, on the Mercenary, you can go Insight to help the mana a bit. On Act 2, of course, there's a lot of things you could do, of course. You could also, you could go, like, Insight Staff on an Act 4 for, like, the healing. You could go, if you're on Hardcore, I always go Act 5 for the bow. Battle Orders is definitely really big. And so you can also do that as well. And then, yeah, I mean, you could just use a really powerful Act 3 Mercenary too, and those tend to be just really strong in terms of like adding damage. I do like the tank in front of you though, so when you're doing Inferno, you have to channel. So I would prefer Act 5 or Act 2 Merc probably on this build almost every time, but there's definitely some options just to like to show people that there, or let people know. Anyway, so we got Chain Lightning, so Inferno Firewall is definitely really insane in bosses. You can do it in Travancore as well. You can do it in Stony Tomb. Chain Lightning though, the place of interest here is going to be Arcane Sanctuary. So all of the lightning builds on this list are pretty high up, and that's because farming Arcane is super strong in PD2. if you guys don't know, if the ghosts die over the edge, they still drop loot. Also, the paths are way fatter in PD2, and you can kill them with impunity. You don't have to worry about ghosts being off the edge or whatever. And ghosts have insane loot tables. They have almost a 4 times higher chance of dropping a rune, a charm, a gem, a jewel, and other certain types of items like puzzle boxes and worldstone shards than the normal average monster. This is because they can't drop armor or weapons, so their loot table is constricted. That kind of loot, though, is always good. See, there's the kind of loot that you can get where, yeah, that's good, and it can be good, and it's especially good if it gets a good slam. But then there's the kind of loot you get that literally helps out every build and is always valuable no matter what. Skill GCs, runes, GG jewels, all that stuff could be incredibly valuable. Obviously, high runes, you can get up to Cham in there. It's insane. And on a Sorceress, you got arguably the fastest method to farm it early game. All you gotta do is stack some plus skills. On the build, you can run a static Act 3 mercenary so that you can get that negative res debuff, which is really, really reliable, and just spam chain lightning everywhere and basically max out teleport to lower out the debuff, to lower it as much as possible. And then you crush face, you get all those GG items, and it's insanely effective. I definitely think it's one of the top approaches, period. And I think a lot of people should look into it. That's insane. But yeah. Alright, so we got Ice Barrage. Okay, so did I talk enough about that? Yeah, I mean, there's also the fact that you can there's a lot of different weapons you can get. I mean, you can get a Shooters, you can get even Tempest early on. There's not a lot you necessarily need to make it work. You don't even need Shaco, because you don't need Magic Find. All those types of items don't require Magic Find, so you don't even need to stack it. You just need plus skills and maybe a negative light res off the mercenary. I don't know. A lot of insane stuff, and of course it can be corrupted sometimes, which puts the level up to 85, and you can find even better loot sometimes. And so, yeah, good stuff. Ice Barrage and Frozen Orb and Blizzard. So all of these abilities can be used to target bosses. It's pretty good. Obviously some other like Oculus Tempest abilities here as well for really simple stuff. It's really helpful to have like a powerful Act 3 Merc or just an Act 2 tanky Insight Merc, or of course Act 5 if you're on hardcore and need bow before you get CTA. All those are pretty solid on these approaches. Farming Travancore is really good with cold builds and also the council members before you kill Mephisto. It actually makes it a lot easier to kill Mephisto when you have like cold or fire because the council members are immune to lightning. So those kinds of things tend to be really good when the council members surround Mephisto to begin with. So those kinds of abilities tend to be very solid. Council members have great loot tables as well. And obviously if you become really strong or your merc becomes strong along with you, you could farm chaos with them as well, and that's also a very solid approach. Some of those like Act 5 red portals, I think one of them doesn't have cold immunes or something, so might want to consider that with the buffs on that as well. So these abilities are definitely very solid at just farming monsters in general in max level areas. The Act 5 red portals and things of that nature. Just not the pit. Don't do the pit with cold. It's pretty bad. Alright, and then Combustion Fireball is insanely good in areas like Stony Tomb. That one's really good. And then, of course, the mercenaries I talked about already pretty much are the same strong mercenaries in the early game. Remember, you got a Cleansing Mercenary and a Prayer Mercenary in Act 3 as well, so there's ways to become tanky without bow on hardcore as well, which is really cool. And of course, those mercs do a lot of added damage, so they help out your DPS. Combustion is great in an area like Stony Tomb with no fire immunes. It's also great in Maggot Lair. Inferno Firewall can also be used in Stony Tomb and Maggot Lair. Maggot Lair is a max level area with much bigger paths in PD2 as well, kind of like Arcane Sanctuary. So you can definitely take advantage of some of those areas with lots of monsters, some of those max level areas. But that's in general probably what you want to do with Combustion Fireball. You want to mass clear some of those early 85 zones. And then, really strong energy shield off Tempest, things like that are very powerful in this build, of course, as well. And obviously, there's a lot of one skill armors. You got Q Hagens, you got Spirit Shroud. All those are going to be pretty good if you find them early. Obviously, Mage Fist is going to be pretty big. You can always farm a little bit of a boss, like with one of these other skills, and then you farm, like, get some base items, and then do a respec, and then you can start farming, like, the higher level areas and whatnot for a bit more. Um, yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is here. All right, Meteor. So Meteor is a lot of physical damage, and as we know, there is a mercenary that starts out with amplify damage, which is the Act 4 Dark Mercenary. Before you get an item like Wild Witch Stringbow, which is definitely an alternative, which you can do on an Act 1 Mercenary, definitely familiarize yourself, or like Gavel of Pain on an Act 5 Mercenary. If you're doing any kind of build that does a lot of physical damage early game, familiarize yourself with the Act 4 Mercenary and the Amp, because that's going to make it really strong. You can just pick up that Act 4 Mercenary, set your home to Act 4, and then start farming Mephisto. And Meteor is going to be insane. Obviously, it's really good against Andy, but Mephisto has a better drop table and also has council members around him. Super strong stuff to start with Meteor, and you can definitely make use of it. Of course, any fire ability also definitely benefits a bit more from things like Leaf Staff, which is a really early game approach, kind of like Inferno. You can still get a lot of skills, not 9 skills, but because these abilities are stronger just straight up in terms of just damage instead of like continuous damage. Well, except Firewall is kind of insane, but these abilities, of course, will also benefit from something like a Leaf Staff as well, so really, really cheap stuff. Obviously, on some of these other builds, you can go like Spirit as well, which is 1 skill in PD2, but it's still decent. But on Fire, Leaf is probably usually better. And then, of course, Hydra, which is also good at bossing as well. So definitely a really safe approach, too. Like, if you want to kite them around and whatnot and kill them with Hydra on hardcore or something, you don't have to worry about standing still and getting wrecked in the face with the lightning or something from Mephisto. Definitely some nice stuff to go with. All these skills definitely have their strengths and weaknesses, but as you heard me go over, a lot of them are better at some things than others. Like Combustion Fireball is better at tier 85 farming than Meteor and Hydra, for instance. So keep that in mind. Also, Inferno Firewall is better at bossing than Chain Lightning, which is actually pretty terrible at bossing without lots of gear. And so, like, you got a lot of ideas. Like Blizzard's pretty good at bossing, and all these can be pretty decent at it. But they also these builds can actually be they're kind of 50-50. They got a bit more flexibility in terms of the strategies they can employ. And if you're playing a Sorceress, you're definitely playing one of the top starter classes, like always, just due to their sheer mobility, damage, and AoE. So no matter what you choose to do out of those top approaches I mentioned, it's going to be really, really solid stuff. All right, so let's go into the Druid. So Druid summoners, the only thing you need on a summoner is plus skills. That's it. Picking up those Druid helms, kind of like picking up Sorceress orbs, might prove to be pretty important on the Sorceress, or crafting Sorceress orbs on the Sorc. Crafting and picking up Druid clubs and Druid helms is pretty key. Now, because you have helms and clubs on the Druid, and the Sorceress only has orbs, that gives you a lot of opportunities. So make sure you're looking at those crafting recipes for the crafts in PD2, like the caster clubs and things like that, because that's going to allow you to get a lot of plus skills very easily. Of course, to farm a lot of those mats, that's where the Nightmare Cows comes in handy. Nightmare Cows, you're going to want to pick up all the Flawless Gems. You're going to want to pick up all the low runes, any kind of low rune that drops, and then you can craft some really cool helms depending on what kind. It doesn't really matter too much because you can get plus skills just from certain crafts, especially upon hitting like level 70 or like level 80. You can get really good crafts there. And you can go to town. Clubs can get a lot of plus skills. Helms can get a lot of plus skills. And guess what? On summoners, that is literally all you need. So any kind of Splendor Shield can help, like anything that can give any plus skills whatsoever helps out a lot here. And of course, the fact that you can get Amp off of an Act 4 Mercenary immediately, and then you could get it with Wild Witch Dreambow. You could even get Might Aura off of an Act 5 as well. And obviously, if you're playing hardcore, the Bow Mercenary is always a choice. But really, really good stuff in general. You want to empower the summons. Obviously, if you get Wild Witch Dreambow, that's better than Act 4 Amp because you can get a Vigor Aura Mercenary, and Vigor makes your summons a lot faster and more responsive. It improves their AI, and they will kill the monsters faster for you. On summon builds, you're typically going to be doing farms like Chaos, Travancore, and you can do bosses, but it's a little tougher until you get more plus skills. But you're typically doing farms like that, and things like the Pit as well, very early on. And maybe other Act 5 areas, such as the new Act 5 portals that are stacked full of elite packs now via the Season 10 changes. So keep all that in mind. One of the easiest starters in the game is a Summon Druid with Ravens, and you just have to recast the Ravens and sometimes the Wolves and the Bears when they die. And that's all you really got to do. Plus skills is your game plan. Your other game plan can be to get full Alders set. So early game Sorc can go for Towels. Towels is a little more expensive though. Druid definitely can get Alders, and Alders is typically not quite as bad. And Alders is incredibly strong for Magic Find as well. And since you don't need too much power, Alders can give you all the Magic Find and plus skills you need to just easily kill everything. So once you can get full Alders, then you can move on to the next step, which is getting the GG gear, because then you'll be crushing Chaos and whatnot. Be able to get really good stuff, high runes pretty quickly, whatever you want, of course, and then you can either transition to one of the better mapping builds, or you can just continue to play the Lazy Dad build and crush in maps like that. All right, and of course it's physical damage once again, so you know it's got some natural advantages. It pretty much can kill anything in the game from the get-go, so it's really good. All right, Arctic Blast. So this skill is just so strong. You're basically a cold sorceress, but you can get summons and you can get Hurricane for protection, and you have really strong Cyclone armor without even many plus skills. It might be a little tougher to get going than like Summon, for instance. So maybe you want to transition to Arctic Blast after you get some basics, like some crafts and whatnot. But overall, the concept is still pretty similar. You're going to want a lot of plus skills, and even negative cold res from items like Voice of Reason early on could be quite useful on something like this. Because negative cold res will stack with the Arctic Blast negative cold res, and then you'll just melt the game. And then, of course, you can do a lot of content very quickly. So like this kind of skill is going to do really well at something like bossing, just like Inferno Firewall. It's going to do well, of course, at Travancore as well. And obviously there's Act 5 red portals and chaos you can exploit with it as well to some degree once you get a bit stronger. Obviously Maggot Lair is very good, and Stony Tomb, as they have limited or no cold immunes as well. So plenty of places you can play this, just like the cold builds on the Sorceress. Since you have Gust, though, it is very powerful, and it's very good. All these are very strong abilities, though, and you always have decent mobility on the Druid no matter what. Now, Arctic Blast can also clear Hell Cows very fast because it's just really good at density with the Ice Shards explosions after killing a monster nearby. So cows are actually a pretty solid approach on Arctic Blast, whereas for Frozen Orb or Blizzard or Ice Barrage, you might need to get more plus skills for Hell Cows to actually feel good than on Arctic Blast. That's why it's one of the more top approaches, because the damage output on this skill is absurd. So that's what you want to take advantage of even in the early game. Poison Creeper, though, also has absurd damage. And what's really great about it is that it's super passive, and you can just resummon them if you want, or just leave them to do their thing, and things will die. The negative res you get just for free off this ability, just like with Arctic Blast, makes it very strong. For Poison Creeper, personally, I would do cows. Poison builds tend to be very good in cows. Just normal hell cows, of course. I don't mean Blood Moon. You don't want to start with Blood Moon. That might be pretty tough. But Unity of the Ascending Cows is actually really good. Summon Druid is considered to be the possible best day one character because you can do maps day one. You can. But doing maps, quote unquote, on a day one summon Druid is very, very slow. I personally think you should always stay in LOD content until maps kind of reach a certain, you get enough plus skills to reach a certain base speed and to where it's like, okay, it's not like insane slow. You can do it though, it's true, but it's probably not going to be super efficient to do that. Wind. Yeah, wind is interesting. So on Poison Creeper, by the way, all you need is a pus spitter to boost your damage on an Act 1 Mercenary. So if you can afford that pretty fast, that'd be pretty key. Obviously, full Elders on any of these would be pretty nice. And obviously not just full Elders, but you got all the crafting options like I mentioned for plus skills and FCR. Crafting is really key on PD2. Keeping those crafting materials, getting those faster cast rate safety crafts early on, especially for a druid that has 2 items of plus skills. You're literally rolling items with random plus skills on them, and you can get like 5 to plus skills pretty easily sometimes just by getting lucky. So, and that can even determine your build. Let's say you just get a, I don't know, craft with 5 twister or club or something. Then you go twister, right? Kind of depends. Maps are still players 5, yeah. Anyway, definitely. Let me see. Actually, I think, yeah, if you're in my channel, let's see, is it that command still? No, it's not that command. I'm gonna have to find out what the command is again. I do have a crafting command though. There's like a document for it, I think. Anyway, there's also on the wiki as well. So, PD2 wiki is very useful. Anyway, Wind Tornado Twister. So with just a couple of plus skills and decent FCR, like 63 or 99, you can plow through Chaos and Travancore very easily on this. Once again, if you have summons in front of you, just like on Arctic Blast or on any build pretty much that you're doing, because summons are just such great phase tanks. You can do these builds very comfortably, even on hardcore, and not risk dying too much. And that's just because you always have tanks. You always have tanks you can resummon. And of course, you have good mobility with Gust. And physical damage is very good. I wouldn't boss with the Wind, though. Wind is probably better in the 85 areas, particularly Chaos. It's good in Trav against the 85 monsters. And, actually, wait. Not 85 monsters, but close. And then, yeah, so it's just Travancore having those amazing loot tables on the council members because they're good at dropping runes, gems, charms, and just unique items as well, which makes them in some ways stronger than ghosts, but there's less of them. And with the new set home, man, like the set home command, setting home to Act 4 is huge for Travancore, so just remember that's going to be big. That's going to be big in Chaos as well. So Season 10 definitely making some pretty awesome changes. Increasing the viability of Travancore and farming areas like it, so just keep those in mind when you have options. Obviously, farming like the Maggot Lair would be okay with Wind, but I think I'd prefer Fire, which is the one below. Fire does a lot better in things like Stony Tomb and the Maggot Lair, and with these abilities, that's what I would farm, honestly. I'd also farm cows. Wind doesn't do insane with cows either, unless you have a lot of plus skills. Fire, Poison Creeper, and Arctic Blast are going to be your cow farmers on the Druid. Summon's gonna have to do things that are a little easier to kill until it gets more plus skills. So, Pit, Chaos, and then Trav or both or whatever. Stony gets you over the hump. Yeah, Stony Tomb will get you over the hump, give you good experience because it's a max level area. Absolutely. And those Act 5 portals can spawn with some interesting monsters because they have so many. I think farming them is gonna be really good this season, so people are gonna want to check this out. They buffed it twice, and on the second buff, I'm kind of convinced. Because now it's out competing Pit potentially, which is interesting. Because it has more elite packs. Yeah, they're in Act 5, the Act 5 red portals. So definitely make sure to check those out in the early game. People are probably not going to know to do that. This is why I'm mentioning it in the video, because a lot of people don't read patch notes. I mean, it's like 42 pages, right? I mean, it's like reading my data sheet, you know. There's a reason I make the tier list and not just the data sheet. It's just it's a little much, you know. Like people start seeing numbers and they turn their brain off. You know how it goes. Um, anyway, Bear Shockwave Summon Support. Sweet. This is a sick build, honestly. And because they buffed Shockwave, I think with the summons in front, this is a great grouping build, but I think it's also even better solo now. And I think this is like maybe one of the better chaos or just Trav approaches, period, now. I think you probably flatten the council members if you do Trav with this. Get a Vigor Aura Mercenary with Amp early on, or just use the Amp Mercenary early on with the Act 4. You want to use Amp, by the way, with Volcano and Molten Boulder and Armageddon as well. Same thing with Wind. So those Act 4 Dark Mercenaries, and of course the early game Amp solutions like Gavel of Pain on hardcore, maybe for the bow, and then for the Wild Witch String Bow on an Act 1, which is a little more expensive sometimes, like a Pole Rune or something, but you can still get it pretty easy. Anyway, Shockwave Summon Support, I don't know. I feel like you could just smash Chaos with this probably pretty easy with the damage buffs and the fact that it's so tanky. So Shockwave, definitely a great starter, I think. A lot better than it is a mapper, honestly. It's probably a better bosser and starter than it is a late game mapper. But also, like, even in early tiers of mapping, I can imagine it being even stronger as well. And that's pretty much it for the Druid. Pretty standard stuff, honestly. You want plus skills on most of these. Obviously, I explained really good ways to get them. The crafting is pretty big, and just picking up those types of helms in general, the helms and the clubs. Remember that there are plus Druid skills on clubs. Do not forget that. Very important on your early game Druid, that you're picking them up and that your loot filter shows them the clubs and the helms. Very, very important stuff. So you want those plus skills early. You want a lot of them, and even a +3 amulet on a Druid is so big. So like if you get a +2 or +3 from farming the Nightmare Cows, as I told you in the beginning, you should be doing before you enter Hell. If you're not doing Nightmare Cows, you're doing it wrong before you enter Hell, because PD2 just stacks that area so well with crazy advantages that make it even more OP than it is in the base game, where it's already really good. But anyway, that's what you want to do. I mean, obviously, vendor farming for res is a thing too, still on PD2 potentially, but man, just gotta farm some cows and Nightmare. You're ready for Hell. You do those early Hell areas they talked about. You start farming them. With the cows, with the materials, you start crafting some things. Make sure to keep some bases to craft, or keep gold so you can buy it from Geed or whatever, and you're good to go. 100%. My loot filter is ready for season 10. Yes, it is. All right, the assassin. Okay. So assassin is not one of the strongest starting classes in the game. Druid and Sorceress are way better starters if you're a new player and want items fast. Druid definitely. If you just want items fast, Sorceress, always a go-to on any version of Diablo 2. I don't think that's, well, most versions, I should say, as long as it has that teleport, right? Assassin is going to be a little more difficult. So Assassin's a little more technical. There's a bit of a chance that the skills might not have as high returns because of some of the areas that you have to farm, or just that fact that you maybe farm them a bit slower. So let's kind of talk about it a bit. Crafting clause, shopping clause, very important for plus skills on the assassin. Kind of like with the Druid, and the fact that orbs are important on a Sorceress, pretty similar stuff. However, on an assassin, you've got lots of very powerful abilities. So Wake of Fire, very strong in Stony Tomb very early on, and then you can graduate to Maggot Lair and Cows. So we probably start doing Stony Tomb in the beginning, get those levels, find some cool items in there in the Player's 5, lots of elite packs in there, so it should be pretty nice. And then you're pretty much good to go. Once you can farm hell cows fast in Wake of Fire, though, it actually becomes really good at early game farming. And so that's why I have it as the top one, because it has very good potential. And you don't need a lot of mobility, of course, to do cows well. So that is an area where the assassin is a little bit lower in. So it's got the AoE component though, which is good. But if you get claws with plus skills, definitely keep them. Make sure to check the claws. Check the craft the claws, shop the claws from Nightmare Anya. Um, Claws. And then, of course, plus skills, one plus skill from lore, plus trap skills, going to be very important. Obviously, for the mercenary, Act 3 will help to supplement your damage a lot, I'd say, on this build, more so than a lot of approaches. Making yourself faster with a Vigor or a Mercenary in Act 1 is also viable, and of course, hardcore is the Act 5 Bow Mercenary. Claws of Thunder. Claws of Thunder, I did this approach actually one season as a starter, and man, is it good. Now, a lot of people don't know how, but with the new Claws of Thunder, it's even better. So I'm going to, kind of expand on this a bit. I actually think it's better than just plain old Phoenix Strike, honestly, but Phoenix Strike could also be used to the same effect. So I think both of these skills are probably best in Arcane Sanctuary. Charge to Phoenix, and then Claws of Thunder in general. There's no lightning immunes in Arcane. Once again, the ghosts have the crazy loot tables. Claws of Thunder, you just have to chain Dragonflight between the packs, cut them up with it. You can use Crescent Moon Claws even. So on Lightning, there's a few more options than Fire. Obviously, eventually once you can get Stalker's Coal and Bartux, they'll be looking okay on, some of these martial builds. But obviously, like, you could put Crescent Moon in a Claw in PD2. That is a thing. So you can get a lot of negative lightning res. You can even use Storm Spike. There's some very cheap items that are very easy to acquire on some of these builds. I think with Wake of Fire, you also have Hex Fire for 3 skills. You can, of course, use Leaf Staff as well to some effect. I think Hex Fire has attack speed too, so that's nice for trappling speed. There's a lot of different things you can do, of course. Obviously, there's a Hell Plague Longsword for 2 skills. And then obviously you have things like armor. So you have the Linked Mail as well. So it's Spirit Forge for 2 skills. These are all very cheap items, at least for fire. Now for lightning, of course, I mentioned Crescent Moon. There's other claws that are pretty easy to get. Like I said, plus skill claws will be pretty easy. Obviously, Phoenix Strike, though, the lightning component of the damage is very good, so you can also do that in Arcane. I think Phoenix has more versatility, though. I think Phoenix would be really good in those new Act 5 areas because it has every element. You could also do it at the pit. Claws of Thunder is basically an Arcane game. That's the Arcane skill for sure. And it's got great AoE. It's going to kill the ghost fast. Use bursts of speed. Just run up and, keep dragon flighting and killing everything in there. Target the ghosts if you can. You can skip the other monsters if the ghosts are really the key. And then do what you can in there. You'll get that GG loot, no problem, like the loot I mentioned earlier. Phoenix Strike, like I said, has a couple of other options. Obviously things like Kira's isn't super expensive, and it's like super powerful for Phoenix early game. Can be really key for any of these martial builds, just not trap builds as well. It's not like insane, honestly, to get a Kira's, so like that could be like a top priority to farm that item, or Bartux or whatever, and get it going. And get that plus skills and be good stuff. That'd be really good stuff in general. I think Claws of Thunder can go Act 3 Static Mercenary. Once again, more negative res there in the very early game. Very strong approach for damage. You could make an argument, though, for going like Vigor Aura, just for moving around the Arcane Sanctuary faster. That kind of stuff is definitely the way you need to be thinking on a lower mobility character, is how can I get this character to move into the area and to pass through it and kill elites as fast as possible. So very key approaches there. Obviously, you can also use this in Arcane. You could use traps. I think traps might be just as good as Claws of Thunder, and they're definitely a lot safer. They could be even better, maybe. They might have more AoE. I don't know. Try these two out and see what happens. For this one, though, Crescent Moon isn't going to do anything because it has negative enemy res for the trap, so it's just plus skills. It's just crafted claws and shocked claws for the most part in the early game to get that going. And remember, for arcane farming, MF is not going to matter much, so you just need damage. And that's part of the reason why it's so strong. Mind Blast and Psychic Hammer. Okay, so this got buffed a bit with the increasing radius. Definitely check out that Mind Blast Psychic Hammer. It's very, very strong stuff. Very, very strong stuff. Yes, the spreadsheet is public. Type exclamation S10 tier list. Also, S10 data is part of it as well. Of course, you can see that it is public as there are a ton of people in here at the moment. Just checking it out and following along. Thank you guys so much for the support as well. I know I have alerts turned off today, but don't worry. I am seeing what you guys are doing. Awesome stuff. All right, let's continue. So Mind Blast Psychic Hammer. I really like chaos farming and like the Act 5 red portal areas, pit. All that is really good with Mind Blast Psychic Hammer. You'll notice kind of a trend here that assassins aren't really the best early game bossers. If you want an early game boss, your best shots are probably honestly Phoenix Strike, Wake of Fire, and Inferno, probably for Andariel or something. And then like Blade Sentinel obviously is going to be strong even in the early game. Of course, Blade Sentinel is a bit different. Blade Sentinel, you might want to go for weapon damage, and you want to get a lot of elemental damage small charms. So like flat elemental damage before you get trap GCs and whatnot is actually really strong on Sentinel. And you can get enough of it to kind of slice through anything, and that's going to be a great chaos farmer as well as a pit farmer and a boss farmer. And of course on Blade Sentinel you can go the Amp Merc early on, and then the Act 4 Mercenary, and of course you could lead into other sources of amp later on the Mercenary, which can give you more vigor aura, like on an Act 1 for instance, so you can run through the area faster. Once again, going faster and getting damage boosts from your Mercenary or survivability on hardcore are crucial. Even when you don't have all the crazy auras, make sure to make use of those Mercenaries to improve your speed in the early game. Definitely. I talk about a lot of different ways. So like for traps, I mean, I don't know. On this, I'd probably go static because you have to stop a little bit. But Vigor Aura can be good on any of these things once you get them going. And it's default on the Act 1 Mercenary, so it just depends. Cobra Strike, of course, can be a great cow farmer early game. You just got to be careful. And you got to get plus skills up on it, obviously. Carrion Wind is a great starting thing to get more negative res with the poison creepers, so that can make a big difference. Early sources of lower resistance, such as obviously Pus Spitter, just any kind of random Pus Spitter on the Act 1 Mercenary with Vigor can make this pretty key. Poison, of course, is also great in the pit. It might be okay in the Act 5 areas, and it's pretty good in Chaos and Trap, so definitely a lot of good potential early game farms with that build as well. And, yeah, that's pretty much it, I'd say, for the Assassin. Now, the Barb is actually really easy to kind of go over. Actually, I'm working on the second video right now. I already did the other video, but we're almost done with this, so I'm almost done with all the videos for, well, all the main videos. There might be, there's gonna be more videos later on, I'm sure, like slamming and whatnot, but depending on the content, of course, or what's going on, but sure, maybe I died or something on hardcore, who knows, but here we go. So we got Barbarian. Barbarian's pretty simple, though. Barbarian is okay. So Barbarian, basically the best way to make Barbarian work is to farm Travancore. That is your area, and I'll tell you why. Find item, especially in PD2, when you don't have like infinite teleport Enigma, it's not really much of a thing in the late game. Find item is early game utility, and its council members make the best use of it, period. So council members have amazing loot tables. If you can loot them twice, which is what Find Item does, you can get very rich on a barb very fast. So it doesn't matter what approach you use here, whether it's any of these 5 builds, any of these things listed here, your top farming strategy on a barb is always Travancore. Always. That should be your go-to. Unless you just want to leech off of your team and just give them bow, that's definitely battle orders. That's definitely a strategy. Or just give them, shout, bow, and battle command, all that stuff. You can do that too, and your team will be happy to gear up your barb, I'm sure. But if you don't have that going on for you, Travancore every time. There's no other strategy on the barb that comes close to Travancore. So what really, so you really want to farm those council members. It's really, really efficient. Once you get that Find Item with enough plus skills, you put a lot of points into it. It's pretty good. Good news about the damage skills is as long as you have like maxed out mastery, you don't have to worry about like upping your damage by marginal amounts. What's going to make the most difference is how powerful your weapon is from there. And this is why you can max out Find Item and whatnot and Find Potion. It's because you don't need that much more damage elsewhere in the skill trees. All you need to do is max out the mastery. It'd be pretty good typically. Get some other helpful things like 1 point leap, your natural res, and all the other stuff. And then you'd be pretty good to go. So then the real challenge of this class is getting damage. So this is where crafting and picking up items is very important again. Corrupting items for enhanced damage potentially. Becomes really big. Using all of your shards on the Barbarian, trying to get enhanced damage. Corruptions on other items or weapons that already have enhanced damage. That's going to be really key to any of these approaches that aren't Warcry. Now, Warcry, you just need plus skills. By the way, deep wounds, you max out deep wounds on these builds as well. You get high Find Item, whatever. And then you max out mastery and you should be good to go. That's like every Barbarian in Travancore. Alright, it could be double throw, it could be good throwing weapons, it could be good fast frenzy weapons. You maybe found some BK swords or got them for cheap or something. They can be very good stuff, like Bull Kathos, very good set early on for frenzy. You've got yeah, I forgot to mention on the Assassin, by the way, Natalia's, of course, is your mid-game set. Natalia's really good with things like Blade Sentinel, for instance, and martial abilities. So, yeah, make sure you're going for that mid-game set. On the Barb, of course, IK set, Mortal Kings, really good for Leaf Attack, Whirlwind, early game. Warcry, though, all you gotta do with Warcry is if you craft or get a bunch of like plus skills for off of like Warcry Home or something similar. If you can get the Nodge's Puzzler set, it's also really good for Warcry. There's some easy approaches early game, but really you just want FCR off of corruptions. You want to make sure to get some plus skills. It's pretty big if you can get it on the Barbarian helm. So crafting Barbarian helms or picking those up, very important to pick up the Barbarian helms. And then honestly, because you have such strong battle cry on Warcry, even though your damage might not be insane, you actually kill the council pretty easily without hardly any gear whatsoever. Just need a little bit of plus skills, some FCR. Basic rune words can do this. You could use double spirit. I think that's what I used in season 6 to start out. Double spirit sword, freaking stealth, and then you get like a plus skill Barbarian helm and pretty much good to go. And then you just cast Battle Cry, War Cry them for a bit. And then you'll start finding things like, IK Helm and other stuff that could actually be really good from the council. You start beefing yourself up. So it's actually pretty easy to get some of the most valuable items in the game, of course, from the council, no matter what. But no matter what approach you use, it's not too bad. Obviously, early game, if you don't have your source of amp yet, amp will always help a Barbarian. Always, always, always. Act 4 Mercenary is good, but the problem is it doesn't survive Council well without stacked fire res. So you might need to, if you find like a Dark Glow armor, that's a really cheap way to get it. I think, at least on the Mercenary. Of course, you can also get like Guardian Angel or something, and then like stack his res up with like items like Kira's and things like that early on, and then he'll be all right. But honestly, Act 2 Merc with Reaper's Toll survives really well against Council as long as you can get stacked res, some life leech and whatnot. So getting up to those items can be pretty key, and then you keep farming Council as you get more damage and your negative res gets higher and more consistent, and then you'll be good to go. Barb is actually pretty simple. Of course, I mentioned a bunch of different things, but on double throw, you want to get Lacerator ASAP for that amp as well. It's always an amp game most of the time. Whirlwind you can do really well with Gavel of Pain. I have an old video that's still relevant where as long as you just use a Gavel of Pain, you can pretty much destroy the council members, which is Whirlwind and Gavel of Pain. So I mean, there's a lot of things you can do here, guys. A lot of things you can do, and remember, Deep Wounds gives you so much damage that the rest of the damage can kind of stack on top of it. All right, so let's go into Amazon real quick, though. So we got Amazon OP. Melee is harder as a starter. It is, but with Deep Wounds and a Barbarian and just corrupting every weapon with decent ED that has any rare, just pick up all the rare weapons, pick up all the, you can even farm blue items with high ED from freaking Mala, believe it or not, in Act 5. I mean, it's pretty easy to do. This is how I did it on D2R. I did a throw barb on D2R when they came out with the updated throw and made it a lot better. And I just literally just kept farming higher ED weapons from the vendors. You could do the same thing, honestly, on the PD2 to some extent. And since you have corruptions, hey, all it takes is like 100 ED corruption on top of a 200 ED cruel weapon, and hey, that weapon does some pretty good damage, and it's not too bad. It's not too bad. I'm gonna try a Fire Druid. What's a good start weapon and shield? So in the very beginning, you can use Spirit on that. Obviously, what you're really gonna want, though, as I've mentioned, is picking up clubs is very important on a Druid, and trying to craft clubs because they have the plus skills, and those are the easiest ways to get the plus skills early on. Now, you're probably going to want a good club then, and then your shield, you can use Splendor for +1, but there's a lot of things you can do. Shield can be like something, it could just be like a res shield essentially, so you don't die early on, like Ancient's Pledge. Of course, you can do Rhyme Shield, of course, as well. Very early on in such a build, and that'd be pretty good. Not too hard to make a decent one. And then of course you want to move into Earthshaker if you can. Earthshaker is actually like best in slot potentially on a Druid, and it's not super hard to find. So on the Fire Druid, so it's not hard to do. Okay, anyway, let's go over the Zon now. So Zon Cold Arrow. So Zon only has run walk. Okay, so keep that in mind. So in the early game, mobility on the Zon is very, very limited. So in order to make this an effective LOD content farmer, I highly recommend that kind of like you always go amp here if you can on the Barb. On the Zon, you should pretty much be doing Vigor or a Mercenary almost every time when you're starting out. And unless, of course, you feel like you're going to die, but you've got good survivability. She's got good Vita to health conversion. She's got, she got dodge and evade and that kind of shit. So she's actually pretty tanky as it is. Usually, you just want speed. You got movement speed. Believe it or not, that's also what you do in the end game for the Amazon. So the end game looks the same as the early game in a lot of ways on the Amazon. At least when it comes to mercenaries. So like mercenaries, it's just a matter of the fact that you don't really have that much mobility, so you got to make it up somehow. Yeah, it's really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. Yeah, this is gonna be finished far earlier than in an hour, so we're good. We're gonna finish it up, no problem. This video is gonna be shipped and ready to go. Anyways, so definitely want that Vigor or a Mercenary. Act 1, pretty much on all Amazon builds. I highly recommend it. Otherwise, you're just going super slow. Cold Arrow, of course. Moving around Cold Arrow and firing rapidly. Good stuff. I think there's so many cheap builds that do Cold Arrows so well. There's so many cheap bows, I should say. So there's like Melody bows, so picking up any 3 bow skill bows with even stag bows early on can be really big with like 5 what is it, 3 sockets? Yeah, 3 sockets. Um, Obviously, you've got the wizard, the Wizen Draw. Wizen Draw's got a log and negative cold res on it, so that's really good, really early game. And then obviously, you transition into Mavs when you can, but full Mavs is insane, of course, on elemental arrow zones, so very good. The thing about Cold Arrow though is it's gonna flatten. You know, it does a lot of damage, so you can flatten cows pretty easily. You can flatten Travancore, and that's pretty much where you should live probably on that build. Pretty much just those 2 places, and it'd be good to go. Yeah, we're actually making that video right now. The S10 starters will be linked there, and so will the other video when we have them uploaded, which is good stuff. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, we're good. All right, so Cold Arrow pretty much does these things very well. It's very fast. It just does a ton of damage, and even with the nerfs, it should still be in the early game particularly should be very formidable with all the very strong early game items. Make sure you're picking up all the rare arrows as well, um, as all of the bow bases potentially. Melody is very strong. That's a great rune word early on, and yeah, I mean, obviously, eventually get to Mavs and then maybe Ice, but that's much later down the road, and it's very good. Summon, Decoys, Valks, and Strafe. So, Summon Amazon is one of the best, of course, just like all the summoners are some of the best approaches on all the classes that have them. Why? Because they just do a lot of damage, and you don't need a lot of plus skills, and they tank everything for you, and they clear hell. You know, they don't need much to get going. You can resummon them even if they die. It's pretty simple stuff, really, as far as those are concerned. Decoys and Valks, of course, can do a lot of damage, lightning and physical damage, and they can get through almost any part of the game, so it's really good. Farming, of course, Travancore and Chaos will be good with those as well, and possibly those Act 5 areas. I definitely see that being a thing with summons on. But what's even better is farming Ubers like day 1, day 2. You can farm the Ubers on this. It's particularly safe on softcore. I would do it 100% on softcore. Stay away from the Uber bosses. Just get res charms and nightmare cows. Farm those up. Get some passive skills if you can. The new bow, of course, has a lot of them. The Ebonbane, but that might be kind of hard to find. So any kind of 3 to passive ammy would be pretty big. Any just plus skills anywhere. Peace is a really cheap rune word, which gives you a 4th Valkyrie. They actually nerfed the plus skills on it though, but it will give you a 4 Valkyries. So definitely make the Peace rune word, and you'll be set to go. And then, of course, with the movement speed and the vigor aura for the Valks and the decoys as well, and you'll be sitting pretty. Ideally, you want Wild Witch String Bow as soon as you possibly can, so you can proc Amp for your decoys or Valks. Either that and or Atmas in some kind of bow that does decent damage, which, you know, there's a lot of options. You maybe can find a cheap Eagle Horn or something that people don't typically trade for at high value, and you'll be pretty good to go. Good stuff. Of course, there's even, you know, like Cliff Killer is amazing too. It's like an amazing starting weapon. That'd be the same on Cold Arrow, by the way. Like Cliff Killer is really good. Definitely some really cool weapons that you can use, no problem. Lots of damage. Easy stuff, and Zon is like a really comfortable farmer with those builds. Heck yeah, man. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys for being here, and Showing support for the mod and the content creators. We are doing great. We are doing great. All right, so next up are these two approaches, which I think are kind of related: Lightning Strike and Power Strike. So Power Strike is like arguably one of the better things to do very early game, like before you even get to Hell. But in combination, these approaches are lightning builds, and what do lightning builds do in early Diablo 2? They farm Arcane Sanctuary. As a matter of fact, if you want to see how this works, you can watch it on my stream live. That is my plan. That is my planned approach for early season. That is what we're gonna do. We're gonna farm Arcane with Lightning Strike and Power Strike. I'm gonna farm some javelins from some vendors. That's what I'm gonna do. Gonna get those plus skills and then attack speed up, so we're getting that up as much as possible. The plus skills and the attack speed is pretty crucial. Of course, we're gonna try to get like probably gonna use Rhyme Shield early on, so I cannot be frozen. Run around with some res. Just the Shale F runes in the Rhyme Shield are gonna be nice. And then, we could use Peasant Crown, we could use Lore, whatever we want, really. Lore might help with the sustain, so that's kind of nice. Mana per kills. Might even make like a 3 turd helm. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we have a problem with that. Maybe we don't. And then, yeah, just get some attack speed gloves, maybe even try to farm like 220s or 320s from a vendor. And get going in that Arcane, get some of those plus skills on both of them. Probably set them up. Remember, gloves can be your best friend too. Not just javelins, but javelins are pretty key on an Amazon, those and bows. So make sure to pick those up and to farm them from the vendors as needed. Movement speed is going to be pretty key in general on any Amazon build. So, boots with faster movement speed, definitely going to prioritize those. And, yeah, really, really good stuff. Obviously, on the lightning builds, you can use Act 3 Static Field Mercenary. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Vigor Aura is going to outdo the Static Field Merc, but you never know. Maybe very early on we just lack damage and we need the Static Field Merc. I'm going to have to try that out, actually. But either way, it actually works, so it doesn't really matter. It should work just fine. It does, Phoenix. It does. All right, so Plague Poison Javelin. So this approach is really good in cows. So like most poison builds, if you're going to farm with it early on, cows, the pit would be okay. Once they get even stronger, chaos can get melted by them and trav and whatnot. But I definitely think cows are going to be really high tech on this build. It's going to be nice. You can farm those hell cows with a lot of damage. Any kinds of plus skills or negative poison res or just percent poison damage like Radamant Sphere, Snake Horde, great early game items. Obviously, like Venom Grips aren't super expensive, so that's always nice on something like this. And of course, you can find them, so it's not much of a problem. Just gotta find some kind of decent mid rune and trade for it, and you'll be good to go. And you can do that just farming Nightmare Cows, or just, I don't know, just starting to farm a little bit slower in those other areas, maybe that start with a pit or something. But either way, it will work out. You get that percent poison damage, you can do it. And obviously don't have to worry about attack speed on here, so that's kind of nice. Movement speed is going to be really key for dipping in and out and firing those plate javelins for maximum AoE coverage. So once again, Vigor Aura Mercenary, very key. Magic Arrow is magic damage, and it has decent AoE, and it can clear everything from the beginning. So obviously there is a bow called Mage Wrath, which gives you up to 6 to Magic Arrow. Very easy to acquire early on. It's a great strat actually for starting out and getting a lot of power on this build, and you can crush Chaos, you can crush Council without too much investment. Maybe just get some plus skills, maybe get some arrows as attack speed. That's all you kind of need, honestly, on this build. It's easy to stack magic, find a magic damage build because there's no facets. So you can put in all the topazes that you want in your armors. So, good stuff in general. But yeah, magic damage though, with the AoE and whatnot, I'd say kind of like Holy Bolt and Fist of the Heavens. This is definitely like a Chaos farmer to some degree and a Council farmer. And cows have really high magic res, so that's often difficult, but yeah, it's not bad. Not bad stuff at all. And Magic Arrow is one of the top approaches on the Amazon, just like all of these approaches. All right, Necromancer. Necromancer. All right, so I low-key think that, especially with the Bone Spear change, that Teeth Bone Spear is probably the strongest starter on the Necromancer, period. Now, I'll explain why. So, basically, all you need is a white wand, which they buffed a couple seasons back, by the way, so it's not trash anymore. A white wand, so that's dual IO and some kind of base wand with plus teeth or plus bone spear. And then you just need to pick up all the Necromancer shields and all the wands that drop on the ground, but especially the Necromancer shields. And then you can just literally find, like, as long as your loot filter targets them, you'll usually find a plus 3 teeth or plus 3 bone spear one just along the way, leveling up. That is like an easy path to almost 30 skills, kind of like Inferno on Sorceress, especially once you combine it with lore, easy +1 armors. And of course, the fact that you can craft wands and craft shields for even more plus skills makes it even more appealing. Of course, for the Necromancer, you want to graduate eventually to full Trang if you can for even more power. And then eventually, you're going for the bone flames and the bone shades and whatnot with maximum corruptions, plus skills mostly and FCRs and things like that. But for the most part, it's really easy. The other thing that's really nice about the Necromancer is you don't need mobility because you have Blood Warp, so you have it built in. You have really good mobility. So that means that you can use mercenaries that help your damage. So in this case, I'd say the best approach is to be Act 3 just for dealing damage and sustain, like from things like cleansing and prayer. But the best approach, I think, would actually be Act 4 light with its sustain for a blood warp and also the sanctuary aura. So it's the same mercenary that you would use in late game as you would use in early game on the Necromancer, in my opinion. And yeah, you could also get bow, of course, in hardcore if you're concerned about having too low HP. Because the Necromancer can be very, very, very squishy. But that's about it. At least for res. I mean, not for bone armor. Bone armor, you'll be really tanky against physical damage very early on. But you'll, if your res isn't like maxed out, you get a conviction cold enchant and the Nova kills you in one shot. That's definitely a thing. So you gotta watch out in the Necromancer. The health values aren't super high, and you'll be good to go. Anyway, those are some pretty basic approaches there. You're going to be farming a lot of Chaos. Chaos is insanely good with bone skills. It's so strong, especially once you just get some basic plus skills like the ones I talked about. Some really easy sources. And then I would just say Chaos, period, honestly. Like, you could do the other Act 5. You could do the Act 5 red portals, maybe. You could do Council. I've seen that. It's not bad. Bone Spear can do Council pretty fast, kind of like Holy Bolt, but your best like it's gonna crush Chaos. That is gonna be an insanely good Chaos build. So yeah, I think we're looking at like top approaches on the Necromancer. I'd go to the Bone Spear, and it takes absolutely nothing to get it going, pretty much. Okay. Course, then we have Corpse Explosion, which is also an insanely good approach because you get a ton of damage, fire and physical, for free, just by laying down corpses with Desecrate because you have percent damage. And of course, you have Amp and lower res built in. If you want both of them, you can if you get 10 points into Curse Mastery as well. So you have the potential to get really strong curses with no gear and then using Corpse Explosion, and then you don't even really need gear at all. That being said, of course, you still have access to White Wand, and you still have access to wands in general, and you still have access to the Necro Shield. So Necro Shields and Necro Wands combined with 2 curses that can make your damage super high, make this very, very powerful. Once again, it could be a great approach in Chaos. It could be a great approach in a lot of places. I actually think those Act 5 portal areas will be broken on Corpse Explosion because of how many elites they have and the fact that you could deal the damage safely from a distance with revives. and just blow up the areas and kill all the elites. So I actually think that's going to be really good on this build. Of course, there's other things that could be decent too with the Corpse Explosion. You can kill Andy with it. You know, if you really want to, you could do some boss farming. And obviously, Corpse Explosion is incredible in cows. So that's honestly, until you get strong enough to do like Chaos and maybe the Act 5 areas, just go to Hell Cows and blow up some cows. And yeah, that's basically it. You got 2 auras. You got the amp and you got the lower resist for both components of the damage, fire and physical. Really, really safe and easy build to start cows with hardly any gear, if any at all. So that's really cool. Yeah, no problem, Georgie. I am glad you are enjoying. Okay, so then there's, of course, the standard summon Necromancer approaches like mages and warriors and archers. Kind of like with Corpse Explosion, you might want to start out. Actually, I forgot to mention the Mercenary in Corpse Explosion. Since you have the curses built in for it, you might want to just go Bow Mercenary so that your stuff stays alive and you stay alive. But I think what could really help your revives do damage, you could also go Might Act 5 Mercenary. That could help. That's a good approach on the other summons, by the way, is going like Might on Act 5 or Act 5 with Battle Cry. It's going to make them do a lot more damage. So that is an approach. There's some other approaches too you could go, of course. Because you have to spam a lot of mana, you could go Insight on Act 2 to some extent. You could go an Insight Staff on Act 4 with Holy Light to sustain your Blood Warp with, you know, I don't know how much you're Blood Warping early on, but you might be. Kind of depends on where you're at in the build. And obviously, you can just go even more damage so you can get more corpses faster. So, you know, something like an Act 3 Mercenary might actually be very useful very early on, you know, or, you know, things like that. So, honestly, Corpse Explosion has almost any option you can imagine, Mercenary-wise, available to it just because it has so much built into its kit already. Now, of course, you have Skeletal Warriors and Archers, Skeletal Mages. Yeah, it's not really missing anything, so you could do whatever you want almost. You could get Pus Spitter for lower res early on, so you don't have to cast the lower res. You know, there's a lot of things you could do. Alright, so, of course, we have the Skeletal Warriors, Archers, Mages, and Revives. So, Mages and Revives, obviously, you'd focus your own lower res curse. Skeletal Warriors, make sure to max out that amp curse. Very, very key stuff. I think the best mercenaries here are ones that are going to grant more damage. So those damage auras early on, like Act 5 Might Mercenary with Concentrate, are probably going to be really good. Whirlwind would be good to help them survive with battle orders, and of course also for the battle cry he likes to proc, which will increase their damage as well. Now for the mages and revives, you know, those are pretty strong as well. I'd say like, you know, definitely maxing out your own lower res early on is going to be pretty key. That's kind of the same thing with early game fire golems as well. Clay golems is maxing out your amp again, so it kind of just depends. But yeah, early game on summons, it could be helpful to have bigger auras so they respond better as well. But I do think Act 5 is especially better on the physical damage versions. On the elemental ones, you could justify having trying to get like Pus Spitter on a Vigor Aura Mercenary as fast as possible. But honestly, on the elemental ones, you could just add a elemental mercenary to your elemental cadre and use like an Act 3 mercenary. So definitely a viable approach, I would say, early game, just getting a ton of elemental damage in there. Act 3 merc is very powerful, so shouldn't have a problem doing that whatsoever. And of course that goes for fire golems and skeletal mages and revives. These physical damage builds like clay golems, which is one of the simplest builds to you know, to start with on the Necromancer, and also very strong, are really good at doing things like Travancore. So Travancore is good. Obviously early game Ubers is also really good on summon builds, just like with the Amazon. So consider that as well, because you have so many summons, you don't have to worry about the Uber attacking you all that much. You just gotta keep making sure to maintain the summons, get enough plus skills so they survive at least long enough to where They're killing them fast, and then they die. So you get multiple curses, of course, and they do even more damage, and it's a pretty good snowball effect for uber damage and uber killing. So fire golems, I would say, you could start out in Stony Tomb or something, and maybe graduate to Hell Cows and start blowing them up with the fire damage and things of that nature. Of course, clay golems, Travancore, and ubers really good. Travancore is really good on early game clay golems. And of course, you can do that. You can also farm bosses with them because they have Crushing Blow. So you have Blood Warp and you have Crushing Blow on the clay golems. You can also farm bosses with a standard summoner, but I'd say clay golems is probably really solid, really early game just to start farming Mephisto. Obviously, you could do that on Sorceress, and we talked a lot about that on the Sorc. But Necromancer has teleport that's literally just as fast. So, especially on the softcore, just use it with impunity and get to the boss and kill them with those Crushing Blow, slow target clay golems, and it's really easy. So clay golems is definitely one of the more tough approaches. I should probably put it even higher up in this list, but these are a bit more balanced approaches, whereas clay golems requires farming certain things with them. I don't know. Kind of can go either way. You can start with Poison Strike and Desecrate and all that. You absolutely can, and it does a ton of damage. Because you have really strong bone armor, your best approaches though to starting out as a Poison Strike is probably farming cows. That's probably just going to be your best approach just in general. And then eventually if you get more tanky, you could start farming, other things, but it's pretty insane. It's pretty insane. Trav, excellent. Very good stuff. But yeah, you definitely have the tankage to actually survive getting hit by Hell Cows early game, and as long as you don't block, you can kind of run in and out, so you can kind of like teleport right in the front of the pack, hit them, and then move, and it should be pretty good. You might have to skill lower resist early on this, unlike in the late game version of the build. Obviously, you can have lots of tanks like golems, no problem with spare plus skills, because there's a lot on this build. But you can get the lower resist, and then you can do that. You can just run in, you strike them, and you should be able to do plenty of damage. And obviously, Carrying Wind early on can add to that damage even further. So very cheap item typically that can debuff the poison even more. So all that stuff's going to make you clear cows very fast. As you've seen the performance in Blood Moon of a late game build of this. It's wild, it's bonkers. So all you need is kind of some of those elements and you're good to go. You're going to want to pick up all the daggers, though. Definitely going to want to pick up all the daggers. I think you can craft daggers. I don't remember. But for definitely want to pick them up. You can make some very basic rune words, particularly, obviously, eventually get Plague, but you'll make like Venom rune word. Venom rune word is good. Venom word is really good early game on this. It's also really good on Poison Strike Poison Javelin. Something like Venom Word, Venom Rune Word just requires a Mao. So you can start making some stuff like that. Start getting that attack speed up with just some random attack speed gloves or whatever you can do. Whatever you can do. Venom Grips, whatever. And it's really solid. Alright, but anyway, yeah, Poison Strike can work. It definitely can. It's a very powerful ability throughout the whole game, so yeah, you can do it. It's just it's a little more I don't know. It's a little more sketch, I think. I think on a hardcore you might want to avoid that. But I don't know, maybe you're willing to test the limits. All right, Dark Pact and Curse support. So I don't think Dark Pact is really the greatest build in the very early game. I think the only place where it can actually be pretty decent at farming early game is probably cows once again. But obviously, as a member of a group, like as a member of a team, Dark Pact is amazing thing to have in a team on an early game group trying to push maps as fast as possible. So just having that curse support, maxed out curses, and then just rotating Dark Pacts through them. Of course, which only consumes one curse at a time. Getting that Dark Force spawn as soon as possible for maximum curses. That would be very nice. I think any early game team would love to have a Dark Pact Necromancer. Alright, Paladin. So, this is the last class. Looks like we ran over like an hour and 20 minutes. Well, that's okay. I mean, it's a good video. All right, how do you know Shockweb is #1 for... Oh yeah, you guys are asking other questions about the tier list. Okay, let's finish the starter video. I will answer some more questions in the chat afterwards. Let's not mess up this video too much because we want to focus on starting out in the game. Okay, so Paladin, Fist of Heaven's Holy Bolt has always been like the best starter, but I would say that role, or rather that ability, is challenged by another skill this time. Hammer does a lot of damage too, but without like Enigma, it's a little bit more janky. It's like charging around and using Joust and hammering. It can be a bit more difficult because of the trajectory of the ability. Whereas Fist of the Heavens Holy Bolt, I mean, you got like you got shotgun damage with Holy Bolt, really good for chaosing early game. Great for Travancore, of course. Fist of the Heavens, same exact thing. Great early game abilities. They fall off pretty hard in the late game mapping scene, but obviously they can still be good precursors to having a good group build as well, for just having maxed out conviction or something. So honestly, it's not bad no matter what, but in the early game, great precursors to farming chaos and Travancore. Hand of Blessed Light is really good, but just picking up and crafting Paladin Scepters can be very key. Same thing with picking up and looking at Paladin Shields. So Paladin Shields and Scepters are your bread and butter. You can get Holy Shield pretty easily as well. FCR is pretty easy to get. Just gotta like, use stealth and lore, and potentially before getting a Scepter, Spirit Sword, things like that. Spirit Sword's like really early game in PD2. Like it's really useless after you get like any halfway decent craft typically. But yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. And of course, get FCR. Make sure you use those caster corruptions, all those nice things in general, and you'll be good to go. No, not caster corruptions. Caster crafts. My bad. Well, I mean caster corruptions. Why not? A Hand of Blessed Light, really good early game. Hawes eventually is like insane on this, but yeah, there's a lot of very basic things you can get early on though, and it doesn't take much. Remember, rare items are good to pick up in PD2. Rares, not just crafts. So yeah, you could potentially get some really nice rare Paladin shields. You never know. Oh, thank you so much for the Prime, man. GG. Let's go. Abundance of Burrs tomorrow, right, Sky? Let's get it. Okay, anyway, Vengeance. Vengeance is so buffed and it has such chain range that I imagine that if you can get enough plus skills on your build, so plus skills will be the easiest thing, and also just any elemental damage you find on the ground, just put it into your inventory. And then you find Saintkiker's Fall, which drops everywhere. Doesn't it drop everywhere, chat? It totally drops everywhere. And then any one of those weapons, like it could be Gimmer Shred, it could be Burner Star, just getting one of those basic elemental damage weapons early on. Just anything, and then just like jumping into them and then chaining them and just doing massive damage with the Vengeance bonuses and max Conviction Aura. You could farm anything with this early game, really. I mean, you could farm I think just like Phoenix Strike, those new Act 5 areas buffed up were probably going to be pretty insane. Chaos is going to be good on this. Anything that has high density, anything that can chain the monsters. Cows will be good on this, almost certainly. Just got to kill the cows and they'll chain to the rest of the cows. Really high density areas are going to be very good. And I see this being a very strong starter this season on the Paladin with the buffs that it got to the mechanics, which are really the key. So, lots of really good early game options for items. Lots of really good things. Once you get Akira's, it's going to help massively as well. So that's like a priority item. And then you go from there, really. I mean, you could just start stacking all the elemental damage you find into your inventory. Plus skills are pretty big though, so you're gonna want a lot of combat skills ASAP as well though. So yeah, like even if you don't have any of those vengeance items, quote unquote, just anything with plus skills is gonna help with the odds of chaining it to other monsters in front of you. You're gonna want to stack this as much as possible, so get those going. pick up those basic skill items, start chaining the vengeance, and then obviously with conviction early on, you have a pretty high level one. But it wouldn't hurt, of course, to get lower resist Act 1 Merc as well. That will also help your movement speed. Obviously, you could also get things that help out with the elemental damage. Since you have a max conviction aura on this build, no matter what, whereas on Fist of the Heavens, you probably want to start with max like Sanctuary or like Redemption or something just to survive. Um, Vengeance, I could see having an Act 3 Mercenary that's insanely strong because you have maxed out Conviction. That's a really good approach on an early game Vengeance Paladin. Same thing with like an Elemental Charger or Zealer as well, if that's what you want to do. It doesn't have to be two-handed either. It could be one-handed. Um, but either way, that is going to be the approach. And Vengeance, Conviction, probably Act 3 Merc just to do insane damage to the Conviction. Or just lower resist on Act 1. That stuff would definitely help out quite a bit. Heck, even the static field on the Act 3 Merc that hits really hard, and since you have max conviction, you'll get all that extra lightning damage as well. So it's not bad. It's not bad. Definitely got a lot of solid approaches. I'd go Act 3 or Act 1 though, probably on Vengeance. So it's gonna be super strong. All right, and then of course, two-handed or one-handed. I don't know. Act 3's got to be insane, right? With max conviction, like it's got to be really good damage. But anyway, it already does a lot of damage. Anyway, so Holy Fire or just Elemental Charge Deal. This is a great approach in PD2. Zakarum Hand is easy to get, and once again, if you craft certain scepters or shields, you can make one that's really powerful early on. It's all about the plus skills, of course, till you get the GG fire damage equipment and things of that nature. Ghost Flame, stuff like that. Storm Spike, even the Shatter Blade, could help out Holy Freeze. Some pretty easy stuff that might be pretty easy to get. You could definitely do all those different things, and depending on the elements, you could farm different areas in Hell. Lots of 85 areas that you could do pretty easily on those. And of course, with maxed out or just conviction of some kind, let's say you're using it on the... You're probably going to have to use native Holy Fire, or native Holy Freeze, and native Holy Shock in the beginning. But once you eventually get damage auras, that max conviction will be insane as well. So on this one, I would say, Act 3 will still help out your DPS here. You could make more of a case, though, for... more defensive options though, possibly even blessed aim. So these types of paladins, not vengeance because it has max conviction because it's a synergy and everything, but these types of paladins with like the early elemental charges and whatnot tend to struggle with attack rating. So blessed aim on Act 2 Mercenary is definitely something to take a look at if you don't have full Angelics yet or whatever. But obviously full Angelics is pretty solid early game approach. Make sure you get that attack rating so you can actually hit, and then the really big damage will come through and kill everything. Whether it's cows or Stony Tomb or Maggot Later or whatever, it's going to do really well. So it's good stuff. Even from the early game, a two-handed physical charge, which is a really high ED sword of some kind, can be really, really huge. Obviously, Sword Guard with an Executioner's Sword. Sword Guard is really good early game physical charge weapon, and it's pretty easy to find. But there's a lot of weapons you could kind of just find, or just craft, of course, high ED, with high corruptions that you can get that will just beast through the game, beast through Travancore, beast through Chaos. Really, the only key on this is getting a high damage two-handed sword and running around and charging into things with life leech of some kind somewhere. Usually crafts can solve all those problems I just mentioned, and it'll be just fun. And obviously, you could use Might on yourself, but because you need attack speed now, you might want to use Fanat on yourself, and then maybe consider using Might on the Mercenary. And then Amp is kind of optional until you get like a really reliable source of Amp, which might be difficult on physical charge. Obviously there's Act 4 Mercenary. You could do that as well. But yeah, it's there's a couple different things you could do there. I could definitely see a bunch of different things working. But those are definitely the farming areas in general. And then, of course, there is Smite, which I think early game. So Smite, Zeal, physical charge definitely could kill the Ubers pretty easily with some decent damage. I mean, something like the Redeemer on Smite early game, if you could get that going and just the amount of damage that Smite does, if you get a really good, like, high damage Smite shield, just get like an elite shield with good res and whatnot, I could definitely see the Ubers going down to Smite no problem, especially with all the buffs. And Blessed Hammer is kind of similar to Fist of the Heavens Holy Bolt. Has the same strengths. I don't think it's as strong because it's not a linear attack in the early game, but once you get more plus skills and if you get more FCR, eventually Fist of the Heavens Holy Bolt will start losing to Blessed Hammer, especially once you get Enigma and things like that. So that's kind of how it goes in PD2. So it's not quite the starter build that everyone wants, but it's pretty good. And obviously with Smite, getting that amp off the Act 4 Merc, that's going to be huge, but because it always hits, so that's going to be nice. And it's way bigger than like the auras and whatnot, so yeah, getting that amp is going to be huge on that build. Or like Gavel from Act 5 Mercenary, maybe with Might, so that could be really big as well. And then Blessed Hammer, same thing as Fist of the Heavens Holy Bolt, probably like an Act 3 Merc, or like Act 4 with the Holy Light, so you got the Sanctuary Aura for the reduced magic res. Of course, you can also use that aura on yourself, but since you're hammered in and not Fist of the Heavens, you probably want concentration on yourself. And that's what you want to do. And the rest of this is just my kind of impression of what the top 3 will be in terms of their best farming area, just being super good and just how easy it is to get going and how powerful the build is without any gear. I definitely think, and just, people, basically the builds that can get richest the quickest. That's kind of what that is, and it's kind of subjective, though. I definitely see some room for interpretation. As you can see, there's no assassin or bard builds here. That's because I consider those like second string starters for the most part, and they will be solid, I think, with a new set home, particularly Barbarian and Assassin and whatnot in their own way, but I think they might struggle a little bit more. And that's it. That's it. Rip Sin and Barb. No, they're, Sin is amazing in the late game, and then, of course, Sin, I think, has always been not the best starter, and Barb is an okay starter, it's just maybe not as good as the other ones. I think with Travancore, though, Barb is still going to be just fine. I definitely could see someone putting a Barb in their top 10 still, even over these other options. But, I don't know. It's kind of hard to see. Anyway, that is the starter lineup for PD2 Season 10. Hopefully you guys learned a lot of valuable information about what kinds of gear maybe you could start with, what kinds of mercenaries, and most importantly, the farming areas and the kinds of farming strategies you could start with to get rich quick. Of course, I forgot to mention bossing with Smite, but since you don't have free teleport, I mean, Nausea can help, but Ubers is probably the play. There's definitely like some of these starter builds are definitely like try to get to Ubers as fast as possible and see how fast you can get them down. Claws of Thunder with 2 crescent moons. Yep, that is an idea. I mentioned the crescent moon rimward on that one, no problem. You guys have any more questions about the starter builds? If not, we're gonna upload it and get it going. Wake of Fire is still wild for leveling. Yes, Wake of Fire is still good for leveling, but I wouldn't say it's amazing. Yeah, it's more of like what farming it has available to it, and the fact that it's not insane at clearing until it gets more plus skills. But obviously, you can shop the claws, and you could get it going pretty fast. So Wake of Fire is still the best assassin leveling build, and it's probably still in the top 15 overall. I wouldn't say it's like the strongest starter approach, though. You definitely are still limited by mobility on the assassin, and the fact that you got to kind of get to the area and then farm it, and I don't know, assassin's a little slower. what path do I take in terms of build with the Vengeance Paladin? I don't know, get those early game items I mentioned, like Sankakur's Fall, any of those like elemental damage weapons that have a lot of elemental damage. Early game, there's a lot of those. Um, and so you should be pretty successful on those. And then, yeah, like any kind of elemental terms, you pick them up, you put them in the inventory until you get better ones. And you will be doing pretty good. I don't think it's a super difficult thing to do because I think when you like play through the game, you'll probably get a lot of this anyway, and you'll continue to get more damage because the flat elemental damage on Vengeance is so strong, and obviously with the AOE on it, the hardest thing is going to be getting those plus skills. So anytime you get plus skills for Vengeance, definitely use them. I think Rust Handle has plus skills to Vengeance as well. I don't know. There's actually some really, really basic items that are like super easy to get that Vengeance will be a lot stronger for. So, yeah, no, it's you're right, Gusta. Absolutely. Act 4 Darkmere casts amplify damage. Yes, it does. Very important thing to note in this beginning of the game, especially on builds that have lots of physical damage, particularly things like summoners. It is a very, very big thing to note, unless you're a summon Necro, and then obviously have your own amplify damage, which is a lot stronger. It's more effective. Aura given flat damage get boosted by Vengeance increased percent over only the non-skill flat from items. I don't know if I understand that question actually. Uh, uh, I believe it all does. I think any kind of flat damage gets boosted by Vengeance 200%. So that's why like percent like damage large terms can help as well. Yeah. Vengeance with Dragon. um I don't know if it quite works like that, but that's an okay option though. Yeah, no, Vengeance is super sick, and then obviously it's almost in the top 10 mappers. It probably could be with, within the margin of error, right? It's number 11, so at least on my data sheet. So it's definitely within the margin of error of the top 10, and it's S minus, super strong build. You could play it throughout the whole game. Just got to get stronger and stronger gear and rune words and all that fun stuff, and yeah, you'd be good. Anyway, GG guys. I'll put timestamps in this video as well, and hopefully you guys enjoy the starter lineup. Let's crush it. Let's get it. See you guys in the next one. Let's just upload these videos and get them to go. If you guys have any comments, of course, you can post them in the YouTube video. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about starting out in the game in general, such as my kind of overview of the best starting areas in LOD and just understanding what areas are going to be best for certain types of builds, especially considering the element. And how the build operates and things of that nature. So very, very cool stuff, and see you guys in the next one.